Welcome, everyone. I'm David Wilson, the Chief Marketing Officer at BoxDrop, and I'm thrilled to host this special 1 hour interview with two powerhouse guests. First, we have Pete Martin. He's the author of the new book, Scale Up Faster. It's a deep dive into strategies of America's fastest growing bootstrap companies, what Pete calls BFGs, bootstrap fast growth companies. What's cool about Pete is he's a four-time founder who has successfully scaled and exited multiple companies, including one acquired by KPMG. He spent 2.5 years researching more than 30,000 companies to uncover what truly drives sustainable, high-velocity growth, and Scale Up Faster is the result of that in-depth work. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to this conversation.
Great. And also joining us is Scott Andrew. He's the CEO of BoxDrop. That's one of the standout companies profiled in the book. BoxDrop is a 5-time member of the Inc. 5000, very elite company in those rankings. Scott's a serial entrepreneur in multiple industries. He's the author of his own book, The Rugged Entrepreneur, What Every Disruptive Business Owner Should Know, and he's founder of the Leadership Academy at East Tennessee State University. Welcome, Scott.
Here, David. Thanks for having us. Very exciting time for Pete with this incredible book coming out.
Absolutely. It's a timely book and can't wait to dig in. So really, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur or someone who wants to scale faster while keeping full control of your company, this conversation is going to be for you today. We'll uncover lessons you can apply, how companies like BoxDrop made the list, and why the Scale Up Faster playbook is such a great resource for today's disruptive entrepreneurs who want to grow very quickly. So let's jump straight in. So Pete, let's start with you. Just take us back to the beginning if you could. And what inspired you to write Scale Up Faster? And why did you focus on bootstrap companies instead of VC-backed unicorns that usually grab all the headlines?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that motivated me to write this book. So as you mentioned, I'm a 4-time founder, started, scaled, and sold 4 different companies, and they were all bootstrap companies. And it's really, really hard to do that. And so around the COVID time, when VC money was just flowing, and it seemed like in the business media, there was a new unicorn founder, as you mentioned, like every single week, so it didn't seem to be kind of this rare thing anymore. It seemed to be like a very common thing, right? And I don't know, something about it really upset me and pissed me off because the business media was putting the focus on this individual saying they were successful because they got $1 billion valuation, which is typically just made up anyway, as opposed to folks like you guys that have grinded it out, and like me and like all the folks that I talked to around this book, that they are the ones that deserve, you guys are the ones that deserve the spotlight. And so I'm a big fan of a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And what I loved about Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, was that he did very, very robust quantitative analysis on the most successful, best performing companies, they're public companies. But to my knowledge, nobody had done the same level of diligence and research for private companies, kind of with the same kind of filter. And so that's what I decided to do. I didn't think it would take me 2.5 to 3 years to put this together. I might not have done it.
Yep, I understand.
It really was this. We need to turn the focus and the attention and the spotlight from, I'll just say those guys, right? They're just out raising money and doing multiple rounds, to folks like Retail Service Systems and BoxDrop. So that's what was behind it.
Fantastic. Well, with that in mind, I'm going to pivot to Scott because Scott, you're a founder of multiple companies that fit the bill, and in the elite BoxDrop, the aforementioned 5-time Inc. 5000 winner. What did it mean to you and your team and your hundreds and hundreds of franchise and distributor owners throughout the country to be profiled in this book as one of the 1% fastest growing bootstrap companies?
Wow, it was a tremendous and very humbling honor, to say the least, just for somebody of Pete's caliber as an entrepreneur to take the time to put together, to amass the amount of data that it took to analyze and break down, tens of thousands of companies that do things like make the Inc. 5000 list 4, 5, 6 consecutive years in a row. And because it's very, very rare air, we would call it, companies that can do that. And then to do it bootstrap, man, that makes it even more rare air. So the work that Pete had to do and his team had to do to find the needles in the haystack had to be tremendous. So we really appreciate it. And it's a great testament. I don't know if there could be a better testament to how good the BoxDrop business is as a business model and franchise, or a better testament to the customer service empowering team that we have at Retail Service Systems that empowers those entrepreneurs to own a business. So it's a great business backed by an incredible team with incredible customers and products and brands. And as to the uh, inspiring part of it, it's beautiful to be a part of things that serve a great purpose, that also fill a great demand. I think, given some of the businesses that Pete has built, I hope that he ultimately builds a coaching, consulting, entrepreneurial community around this book that really generates a whole lot of success stories, thousands and thousands of bootstrap success stories off what they'll learn from the book, because the need for that in the marketplace is tremendous. So for me personally, in terms of inspiring other people, America is such an incredible country based on a free enterprise system, and entrepreneurs are often the very heartbeat of that. And while we do a better job of teaching it and empowering it in American universities and places today than maybe we did 20 or 30 years ago, it's still hardly done at all, and it's not done all that well. And a book like Pete's, with the kind of purpose behind it, is really going to do a lot to not just inspire people to know that they can do something, but to teach them some of the techniques and secret sauces, if you will, behind people who've already done it. And being a small part of that is has an incredible sense of purpose and value to us.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I share those sentiments, Scott. Just, Pete, your book shining a light on what what's possible for entrepreneurs in America and across the world that don't have access to deep capital, being able to know they can do it, to see companies that have done it, to learn the tips and the best practices that we're gonna dig into and unlock today. Super inspiring. So Scott teed it up, and I agree. I'm really interested in this question that's coming up now, because you and your team have done a lot of work. So 30,000 companies you dug into, narrowing it down to just 324. How did you do it? What was your methodology? And I know you're a methodology guy. I know you studied how other books and attack different sectors, but tell us how you found these needles in the haystack.
Yeah, so I was able to get my hands on 7 years of data of the Inc. 5000 from 2015 to 2022. And that equated to 36,000 companies or whatever, with 30,000 companies, and then unique companies was just a little bit less than that. So I started with that database, and then I filtered it by companies that doubled revenues every year for at least 4 of those 7 years consecutively. So as Scott mentioned, that is really, really hard to do. So that took the 30-some thousand companies down to 384. And then, using a bunch of different public data sources, I eliminated the ones that I knew from press releases and PitchBook data and CV Insights that were able to achieve that growth from raising growth capital or external capital. So I wanted to eliminate those people. And the reason that I did that is my own experiences. And again, kind of back to this, give me $100 million and I can grow a company fast too. Do it on a bootstrap basis, that's really hard. And I knew, by studying those companies that were able to do that on a bootstrap basis, there was nuggets of wisdom there that were not making it out into the world. Kind of to Scott's point, this stuff isn't taught in school. In fact, as we get into it, there are quite a few things in the book that I discovered through the lessons of talking to these companies that are completely contrary to typical business advice you're going to get in school. And we'll talk about some of that stuff later.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. So let's just see. Let's pivot back to Scott, and let's see what BoxDrop can start to shine a light on what other companies and founders might want to do. So Scott, BoxDrop has been profiled in a bunch of different media outlets and a bunch of different ways over the last 5 to 10 years. and it's always described as a very disruptive company. It's in a massive hundred plus $1 billion industry, home furnishings industry, that really is kind of sleepy, and it's very disruptive. So, what do you think are some of the biggest drivers of BoxDrop's growth and sustained success that got you in this elite company that maybe other founders and potential owners can take from you?
Well, some of it ties back to things that Pete has mentioned in choosing bootstrap companies. Um, keeping things simple in that regard, and I mean simple in as in filling really, really big needs in the marketplace. You have millions and millions of businesses start every year in America, and millions more people wish they could start their own business. And in the investment banking and banking world, they say that capital is the number one limiting factor for people to start their own business. So bootstrapping has got a huge demand because millions of those would-be entrepreneurs would like to know how to bootstrap a company. So Pete's identified a really huge need, and that's kind of a way to partly answer your question, David. What makes a company sometimes disruptive is identifying an incredible need in the marketplace. Oftentimes, when other people just don't see it, they don't see the forest for the trees. But for BoxDrop in particular, staying passionate about a very simple mission to empower entrepreneurs that are our customers, and to kind of in Steve Jobs fashion, being fanatical about making complex things for our business and filling the needs of our customers very simple. Things like marketing, data analytics, sourcing, brand building, customer uh, satisfaction generation, methodologies that yield five-star reviews in today's social digital world, and then overall financial management, making those things that are complicated very simple for the people who need to know how to do them has been one of our secrets in staying core to our mission. And simple gets confused in the world with easy. Oftentimes, you can't do that. Success in business, as Pete well knows, is not easy. It's hard, and you can't confuse easy and simple. But when you make complex things simple, it sure does make growing a company and bootstrapping a company a lot easier to accomplish.
Fantastic. And I know we're going to get to it later in our show today, but um, when I've looked at all of the successful box drop entrepreneurs and owners across the country, they're very diverse. So I think in listening to your message for other leaders and other entrepreneurs, you've created a proven system that is focused on helping your customers, your franchise owners succeed. And a testament to that, I believe, is how many different people from different walks of life have come into this business and can rapidly grow and succeed with a high rate of success. So
I
Well,
want
I
to
tell you something,
touch on
David.
that too.
Yeah.
yeah,
So I asked a lot of personal demographic questions of these CEOs. Age, literally, like how many vacations do you take? Your educational background. Is this the first time you started a business? All this stuff. What was astounding to me, to touch on that point, was all of these founders are what I call extraordinarily ordinary. So most of them were first time founders. Only 80% had a college degree. Virtually none of them had it from like an Ivy League, big posh school. One guy had an MBA. That was it out of all the folks that I talked to, on and on and on. They were just very normal people that had extraordinary success. And so, David, to your point, I think when you look at your box drop operators, it's the same thing. They come from different walks of life, different educational background, different business experience, but they all had this formula. They didn't know they were executing on a formula, but there was a
yep,
formula, right? And
yep,
we're all extraordinarily successful.
yep. That's a
We were
great point,
thinking
Pete.
of the same. We were thinking of the same thing almost at the same time, Pete. I guarantee you, and I'm going to do this now that the book's out, and I'm going to look forward to giving it to many of our so-called rugged entrepreneurs, as we like to call them. But I guarantee you, I know it. just off the tip of my tongue, numerous BoxDrop entrepreneurs have actually achieved what your very book is about. They've
Yeah.
not made the Inc. 5000 multiple times in a row. That probably some of them could if they well they do that. You have to start at $1 million minimum revenue to get
Right.
started. So maybe not, but a lot of BoxDrop entrepreneurs have done the very thing you're talking about in the book. That they bootstrap their franchise model business on a minimal amount of capital. And we designed the business to be that way because we knew the demand in the marketplace existed that you've written this very book to fulfill.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a great point. It's like, I guess, Pete, you could say you could doubly award BoxDrop. You can award BoxDrop the corporate, the franchisor, and there's hundreds of successful um, uh, business owners within BoxDrop who are, as Scott said, they're bootstrapping it too, with a proven system, mind you. So
Yeah.
great. So Pete, let's swing back to you for a second. You teased us on this earlier that you through your research and analysis of these top performing bootstrap companies, these BFGs, I'll use your acronym, you unearthed some counterintuitive lessons. And so I'd love for you to share those with the audience, because these are takeaways that people can use that maybe they're not just hearing like right out of Wall Street Journal or Fox Business or whatever.
Yeah. So I'll touch on a couple of them. First one is what I just mentioned, that I think there's this profile in people's mind about what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, and maybe they're sitting in Silicon Valley, and maybe they have an MBA, and that was crap, right? We just kind of
Yeah.
talked about that they were extraordinarily ordinary. So that's the first one. One of the questions I asked was, did you write a business plan? And if you go to virtually any college, and I do have an MBA, they will tell you before you start a business, you have to write a business plan, right? None of these guys, in fact, only two guys I think had a business plan. And I think it's the buddy right there. Scott said he had a framework. And then another guy who he wrote a business plan because he just got his MBA and he thought he had to. Everybody else just got out into the market, figured out what their customers needed and wanted, knew enough of the competitive landscape that they figured out how to position themselves slightly differently, and they just went at it. So, in the tech business, we call this product market fit. It was kind of the same thing. Let's go figure out what customers need. Let's serve it in a very unique and different way, and we'll go figure it out. And most of them had said, look, Pete, whatever's on, you put on a business plan, whether it's the financials, whatever, 3 months in, 6 months in, well, first of all, you're making it up. You have no idea, right? And then the
Yeah.
thing is, whatever you put on that piece of paper 6 months later is probably going to be wrong. So that was one big aha. I'm like, wow, it actually does make a ton of sense. That was kind of a big surprise. Again, that I think is kind of counter to the traditional business advice you get. Another one, and you guys were a prime example about this, and I talk about you guys a lot in the book, regardless to this fact, that I'm a marketing guy by academic background. And so I've talked about, you have to have all these different marketing channels kind of working together. You got to do SEO, paid ads, you got to have a sales,
Yeah.
whatever. And everybody, you guys included, essentially had one way to go to market. That was a huge aha. And not only did you have effectively one way to go to market, it was your business model, right? Disappointment only. And I talk about in the book that you guys were able to patent it. I've gotten so many questions about that. They're like, how do you patent the sales process? That's crazy. And I'm like, let me tell you how they did it, right? And then
Yep.
measuring every step of that customer journey from lead to conversion, and knowing
Yep.
where the metrics are, and knowing where stuff's kind of falling through. And you guys did an extraordinary job of that. And that's very unusual. Most business owners are trying to figure out, how do I get new customers consistently, predictably, repeatedly, right? And they try everything. They try the shotgun approach. And 5 of the companies that I profile in the book got all their business, and these are $100 to $185 million companies, got it from cold calling. Like, that blows people away. But they figured it out. They knew how to execute cold calling campaigns. They measured every step of the way. They refined it and improved it along the way, just like you guys did with your processes. And then they were able to scale from that. So 2, huge, kind of different findings. I'd say one of the last ones was, I'm a kind of a systems guy by background. I used to work for a company called SAP, this big, business systems kind of stuff. And my proclivity and kind of my experience was, if you're scaling that fast, if you're doubling revenue every year for a bunch of years, my gosh, you have to put all these systems in place. And most of the companies did not. And it really bothered me. And so after I was kind of got done and analyzing all the data, I'm like, why can that be? And I'm like, then it hit me. If you're putting a system in today and you are 4 times the size in a year and a half, 2 years from now, you put in the wrong systems, right? Because
Yeah.
we need something completely different. And so almost all of you guys had this controlled chaos, as I call it, right?
Yeah.
That served you well, and that the processes that you did focus on were all the customer facing processes. One of the companies I talked to, who shall remain nameless, they were $100 million company, phenomenal success. They did 100 million in 5 years, by the way, and their financials were on Google Sheets. Okay. Again, it blew me away, but I'm like, they're very profitable, grew like crazy, but because their entire focus was on that customer journey and that, the customer interaction. So
Yep. Fantastic. I want to, those are great insights, Pete. And I want to connect some dots back to Scott, because you did mention that Scott had some type of initial plan. Scott, I would, at the same time, Pete, and I'm going to tee this up for Scott. Scott has a term he uses a lot, and is jump and the nets will appear. And also that, when it comes to action versus planning, yeah, you need to have an idea of what you're doing, but action always trumps planning, because that's where you get the learning. I think Mike Tyson, what's his famous line? Everybody has a plan until you get into the ring and you get like punched really hard by the world's greatest boxer.
Yep.
And so Scott, you want to talk about your philosophy there, because I do think that underpins a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit of BoxDrop.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
It's a fun concept just to think about, how the non-entrepreneurial world thinks it is and how it really is very fun just to think about, and even more so when you have a company that gets to a sizable nature, where you test things like bringing in corporate background people who want to apply. I think when you were interviewing our team, Pete, we had conversations about the not so good disruption you can cause a business when you bring in a corporate team, and in your career, you've seen that and analyzed that, and I think maybe even consulted around it. I've seen it personally in my own, until you can get away from the simplicity of your mission in a hurry. If you all of a sudden try to put structure and systems and processes that are found in the corporate world around a high growth company, you got to be very careful to keep that community and culture and I was smiling because you used the word chaos. In my book, I talk about chaos a lot, and great rugged entrepreneurs learn how to navigate chaos and find the opportunities in chaos, and in fact get so good at it that they even get good at creating chaos.
Right.
Like everything's too structured right now, and we're not seeing the forest for the trees. We're going to throw hand grenades into things, and we're going to create some chaos and force people to think and get creative and scratch and claw and grow like you're capable of growing. So I was just smiling inside my head about the word chaos and the experiences I've had in watching different companies grow and different mindsets that are all very smart people, and different mindsets fit differently in certain types of structures of business. But if you want to grow rapidly, chaos is something you better get used to.
Yeah. And I want to, David, it's okay. I want to touch on something else Scott says.
Yes, please.
Scott, you mentioned a bunch already about mission, culture, this kind of stuff. And the very first chapter of the book talks about culture. And I think it's this very soft, ethereal word that people don't really grasp or put their hands on, right? They really don't understand. That was the defining factor for all of you guys. And so what Scott was talking about earlier is a lot of the folks said, we made mistakes by, we were at a certain growth rate. We hired that tenured executive, brought them in from corporate. right, to help us scale, and most of them flamed out. And I think the reason you guys did not is because you were so strong in the culture and the mission and your values that you screened guys like David against that culture and those values, right? And the other folks that you brought in, I know that were professional hires, and not everybody else did that. And that's a huge learning from the book is, regardless of whether it's, somebody on the plant floor to, your next CFO, you've got to recruit, hire, and screen for that culture fit. And I think you guys were able to do that, which is why I think it's worked for you guys so well.
I'm going to add one more. That's a great discussion. I want to add one more log to this fire and this discussion thread is disrupting yourself before somebody else, disrupts you. So I think if the culture can stay comfortable being uncomfortable and being disruptive and not believing that they're there and there's nothing else to innovate and prove and disrupt. So I think in observing BoxDrop and some of these other companies in your book, Pete, that drive and that hunger and that passion to keep being disruptive and innovative, I think is central to sustained success and rapid growth. So Scott, on that thread, back to you. So one of the things that BoxDrop does really well is empower its franchisees through disruptive innovations. And you've talked about it. So it's brands, it's logistics, it's vertical integration, it's marketing, sales, and more. So there's a lot of innovation and disruption that's happened across those dimensions at BoxDrop. So what advice or recommendations do you have for other leaders for them to relentlessly drive innovation to fuel their growth?
It's a great question, and at a very apropos time because of what Pete was just talking about and the fact that it's the first chapter in his book. Having written a book, the first chapter is a very profound thing that you do, because the tone of it in your own mind as kind of like birthing a living thing in a book is very, very important. And that community that Pete's talking about, or the culture that Pete is talking about in that first chapter of the book, man, and this is invaluable, experience, advice that comes through a lot of success and a lot of failure, but understanding at the deepest level what you can do to create community and culture that literally compels your customers to connect and identify, or your employees and customers to connect and identify with that community. And by identifying, I mean they want to be a part of what it means to them to be in that community. It's one of the 7 most driving factors in people's lives to be a part of something that they're proud of. And what that does, especially in today's social digital world, when you're starting at, as millennials and then coming on the next generations who are raised in the social digital era with instant information and platforms for sharing experiences and things with your friends and family and colleagues, the communicative and consociative value that having a great community delivers, it leads to information and idea sharing that creates innovation, that turns customers into research and development and training cheerleading armies that just embrace being innovators, and they like the fact that they're in a community where something they do can affect successful change, and it helps them and it helps others. So, it also provides an incredible stage for recognition, whether that be employees, customers, both. And in today's world of entertainment that the younger generations like, that platform is just becoming more and more and more important. So I think chapter 1 in Pete's book is, it's certainly one of the secret sauce factors that you can build, and you can educate yourself and gain the wisdom from books and other people on how to build community and build it quicker and better.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's, when you build that community right and they're committed from their heart, innovation springs from that. And it's a unique platform at BoxDrop, and it's in some other franchise models where you get that community and that commitment, and then there's sharing of ideas and there's sharing of innovation, and that just feeds on itself. It just creates this virtuous cycle of innovation that comes from, it's not just coming from top down, it's coming from the customers and the other owners in the business. So that brings to mind, Pete, the coin you a term you coined, which I love, which is boot scaling. And so I can kind of piece the words together, and say what it means. But what does it mean in your mind, and how can business owners apply some of the pillars of boot scaling?
Yeah, so I think that it really comes from two places. One is, no offense to Reid Hoffman, who's a former founder of LinkedIn, but
Yep.
Reid wrote a book called Blitz Scaling, and Blitz Scaling is about essentially raising as much capital as you can, hiring as many people as you can, and attacking a market. So, 99.9% of entrepreneurs are not going to have that ability or opportunity to do that, right? Number one. So Scott's earlier point, like bootstrapping really kind of is the way that most entrepreneurs grow their businesses.
Yep.
The other part of it is, I think that there needs to be a mind shift change from, you can scale and grow faster through internally generated cash flow. And I think there's this concept, and anybody that's run a successful business gets the daily emails from the private equity firms, the growth capital guys, whatever, right? And it's enticing. It's like, hey, we're going to write you a check. You can grow a lot faster. And everybody that I talked to was like, oh, we get those calls, right? We get them all the time.
Oh yeah, Scott gets those all the time.
And it's appealing. And so, but you lose so many things. You lose, obviously, control from an equity perspective. It dilutes the culture typically, right? You're focused on bankers and what bankers worry about as opposed to customers and employees. And so I thought boot scaling really kind of wrapped these two concepts in place, which is, bootstrapping is the way to go if you want control of your business and control of your life, frankly. And you can scale by bootstrapping. That's kind of how the two things came together.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. I love the comparison to Reid, which that's a model, right? Just get massive funding and throw bodies at it, and swing, be super aggressive in from a capital standpoint. But not everybody has 47 VCs on speed dial like Reid does, right? There's a lot of other people that don't have access to that, but they still have the dream to scale a business. And
Exactly.
therein lies, the genesis of this book. If I can plug it again, which by the way, we'll give everybody at the end all the details on where you can find this great book. So gentlemen, we've talked a lot about ideas and what strategies and stuff that you've analyzed and all the data, Pete. But Scott, let's bring it right down to real lives, real success stories, real people change lives. You talk about BoxDrop's mission is to empower entrepreneurs. So bring some of this to life. Tell us some stories that about how BoxDrop owners became successful and changed their lives.
Oh, there's so many great ones. Some of the best. Kelly Harris comes to mind. Her husband Trent. She sold him as a customer an upholstery set in her store, and he asked her out for coffee. And about a year later, they ended up getting married. But Kelly, ahead of that, was a mom with 4 kids and single mom, and they've since had a fifth. But as a single mom with 4 kids, she was working as a court reporter and as a waitress at Cracker Barrel. And on the side of that, trying to do some advertising work, and wanted to own her own business, wanted to have better control of her life, and had a great work ethic, and wanted to provide better for her family. And she hit a lot of benchmarks with her BoxDrop business, and would be one of those who doubled her business year after. I remember she went from 200,000 to 454,000 to 1 million to 2 million to 4 million. So she would have been one of those who bootstrapped her way out of necessity into having an incredible home furnishing and retail business in Idaho, and has since then become a coach of other entrepreneurs and our chief merchandising officer. So she's just one that I would always have to mention because I've seen her go from, a tough bootstrap life to her and her husband are multimillionaires and have helped a lot of people in their journey. You got stories of much more professional people like a Josh Haynes who had an account. He was an accountant by background. His family had a couple of tax preparation businesses in West Virginia. He wanted to break away from the family business and do something different. And he actually bought an existing BoxDrop franchisee's business in West Virginia that was very small when he bought it, and he got on board quickly and was very teachable and very coachable. And now he's helped perfect our multi-location super box shop model for entrepreneurs who have a lot of ambition and want to satisfy a bigger financial need in their life. He's got 5 locations in a small warehouse, and he has aspirations for 20. And he's created a business plan where any owner can make between $500,000 and a little over $1 million a year. That's very detailed. So I love him for that. And then you've also got somebody like a Jim Wilson, whose second adult son, or his first, actually oldest adult son, is about to start his own box drop business because his younger brother, um, uh, Kyle, has done such an incredible job with the box shop business. Both of those young men played college baseball, and here their dad goes to work for a company. And when I hired Jim away from the big corporate Eastman Chemical, I told him we'd been holding the territory for one of his sons because his son was a good college baseball player, very coachable. And Jim had always told me, well, my oldest son, Tyler's an accountant and he's got a good job. He made straight A's, but his little brother's aspirations to be a professional baseball were a little stronger influentially on him. And he didn't realize how hard that was necessarily going to be. He was great in college. He didn't make the cut, but he obviously didn't care about grades as much as his older brother. And so Jim told me, he said, I'm really worried he's going to be selling cell phones at a kiosk in a mall because he doesn't have the grades to even interview with a company like Eastman Chemical. I said, don't worry about it, Jim. We've been saving a box drop territory for him. And from his first year forward to now, I guess he's in his 6th year, he's made a 6-figure income
Wow.
and done a great job at all the things. He's very coachable and teachable. And those stories are just fun to not only share, but experience in your life. We do have literally hundreds of them, like the Walters brothers out in Washington State. They're 20 miles apart from each other with their own box drops. They each are in our $1 million producer club and just calmly and quietly go to work every day and do something really big. We got the Baker brothers of the same kind of way. We got a lot of second generation teams in our business system where parents have now brought on their adult children and are turning their business over to them. That's extremely gratifying. Then you got a situation with a new franchisee in Charlotte who are doing very well in their first couple of years, the Mitchells, who he bought a franchise just for his 2 adult sons to be entrepreneurs and kind of identified us as a system for cultivating entrepreneurialism. And they've thrived just in their first couple of years. So there's lots of stories about like that. And um, I love it again that so many of them, and I would say it's the majority, probably 80% of our rugged entrepreneur, box drop entrepreneurs could identify with bootstrapping because that's what they've done with their business.
I love it. Those stories are super inspiring. Again, it kind of links back to where we started this conversation that, um, Pete, your book is uh, inspiring to people who want to have the dream to build a business and not just build it, but to scale it. But they fear that maybe they don't have the ability, they don't have the capital, they don't have fill in the blank. And Scott just rattled off um, multiple stories of business owners who, and I think, who have boot scaled. And so, Scott, I think we've got a great new term for you over at BoxDrop. You just identified a bunch of BoxDrop boot scalers. Okay, so
Absolutely.
so that you just reeled those off. So got a few more key things to cover, gentlemen, and then we're going to wrap this up in just a little bit. But Pete, you talked about culture. I'm going to come back to it. Um, Culture came up again and again in your interviewers. So what did the best companies do that made the cut differently when it came to attracting and retaining top talent? Because as you said earlier, if you get the wrong talent, you see it on baseball teams and professional clubs, and they're doing great, and they get a bad apple in there, and so how do they do it?
Yeah, so I'm going to attempt a really probably stupid sports analogy, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway since you're bringing up baseball. So imagine if you're advertising it for a position and you say, join our championship sports team. Okay. And
Yep.
that's the level of which you describe your culture. And I'm a baseball player, but you're a football team, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not going to work. So what the companies did extraordinarily well, and you guys do a really, really good job of this, is they were able to very richly, descriptively describe what it's like to work for their company. And in the book, I have half a dozen examples. And then we also looked at, once we picked those examples, where it's a paragraph and a half. And when you read this thing, you know exactly what kind of company that is to work for, right? Then we looked at their competitors, and then what the competitors put on their website to attract people. And it was like, come here and make a difference, and we're a value added employer. Like, what does
it was
that
vague,
mean, right?
Vague.
It was kind of silly, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like this: come play for our championship sports team. I'm a baseball player. I want to know what it's like to work. Not only you're a baseball team or whatever football team, but what is it like to work with a team, and richly describe it. And these companies did a really fantastic job. And so when I was doing the questions, they would talk about culture a lot, and it didn't really kind of hit me that deeply. And then we ended up web scraping 324 companies, their websites, their career section. So we looked at how they describe their culture, how they describe their values. There are 10 values that all of them, including you guys, described, that if you want to go scale your company, probably wouldn't hurt to take a look at what those values are, right?
Yeah.
And then again, in a bunch of cases, we looked at their competitors just so that somebody could see kind of the alternative of how they describe that. And culture, and the way you describe your culture, should do two things. It should attract people and repel people. It needs to attract the right people, and it needs to repel the wrong people, right? And a richly described culture will do both of those things. So if you're, I have a client we're doing a boot scaling engagement with, and they're a machine tool distributor to the construction industry, and they work their butts off, and it's very stressful, and they work long hours. And so we encapsulated all that into their culture statement. And so when you read it, you're either like, hey, I'm all up for that, or, oh my God, I want my 9 to 5 job. They don't want those people. So it should do both those things, right? Repel and attract.
That's fantastic. I think that's great advice. Yeah, you do. I've seen that before, where you come across how somebody's promoting job openings and career opportunities, and one example just feels like they just took it out of a template. And others, you read it and you go, wow, this company is special. It may or may not be the special that the job candidate wants, right? To your point. But yeah, you're zero. So that's really great advice.
And as I talk to the CEOs and their leadership teams about, why did someone not work out that they had to let go? It was rarely performance. It was they were a bad fit. What does that mean? That's a culture fit, right?
Yeah.
Well,
in a strong culture, back to your sports analogy, a strong culture will kind of reject a bad fit, right? They won't it they won't fit in, they won't add value, and so that's a great point.
That is such a good sports analogy too. I had just somebody email me, one of our coaches, Kyle Sherrod, emailed me today talking about that very thing, and he lives up in the Rhode Island area, so he's a big Patriots fan.
Yeah,
and he talked huge about how they had the ability to bring bad players in, or bad acting, great players that were somewhat bad actors, and they could bring them in and put them in that Tom Brady work ethic win culture.
Yeah.
And it would straighten them out in a hurry. They would either hurt them in to be champions or hurt them out in a hurry. That was a perfect.
And you knew what that culture was going in, right? They were very explicit about it. So
you're exactly right. You you knew your coach was going to have that cutoff hoodie and a scowl on his face and was going to be all about the Patriot way. Again, I could see, Pete, you weren't necessarily a fan of the Patriots. That means you probably lost a lot of games to them, but we won't get into that. So Scott, one of the things that Pete picked up in his book as the drivers of BoxDrop's impressive growth is the referral rate, and it's, by that I mean that how many of your existing owners, or how many owners came in as a referral from an existing owner, and it's that 70% of your new franchise locations come from these referrals. So that's kind of off the charts loyalty. If you look at the statistics in franchising and growth, that's orders of magnitude larger. So what at BoxDrop creates that kind of loyalty, and I'd say evangelism among your franchise owners?
Well, we've touched on it, and it is back to that first chapter. It's just a part of the culture. Being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. I think it varies between 10 and 15% of the adult population at any given time. And it's definitely not for the people who don't want to work hard. We don't set false expectations. You gotta love, enjoy, and be proud of being someone who works hard, who has a great work ethic, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And that's why we define the term rugged entrepreneur and put it in a book. And that's what we tell the world we're looking for. Like Pete said, it's right on our website, rugged entrepreneur. It's not soft entrepreneur, cream puff entrepreneur. It's not get rich quick entrepreneur. It's rugged, and rugged does not exemplify easy. We may be able to make it simple, but it is going to be hard, and we're proud of that. So I think that we've built a community and culture, David, that people are proud to be a part of. And that's not mutually exclusive to one type of company, like a franchisor, because it may seem easy to be identified that term. To answer your question in the simplest form, I would say success, simplicity, and community. Those would be three things that are inside of our community and are a part of our community, including the community itself. But it's not something that just a company that does franchising or licensing can do. If you look at product and services companies like Yeti or Apple, they've done an incredible job of building communities too, with their customers and employees together, that embrace the pride they have in those things. And sometimes they build sub-community cultures. Yeti's done that maybe about as good as any products company I've ever seen. And then you also have manufacturing companies that have, and I bet you Pete has examples of these in his book. They create incredible employee cultures, and that culture drives innovation and success, is probably the number one factor in it. But that culture and community is what creates those referral rates, David, because people say, "Hey, I'm proud to be a rugged entrepreneur." And this is, I shouldn't say this, but because maybe they refer people to it in two different ways. They like referring it to the people who they know want something cream puff, because they're kind of saying, "I'm a rugged entrepreneur. You ought to try this," when the person is not going to do it. But at the same time, they want to bring people who they think would qualify for that term rugged into the community, because it advances everybody.
I want to riff on that for just a second.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I have a whole chapter on community, and Scott, you probably mentioned that more than any other word on this in this session here. And I start out the book of this chapter talking about the richest pop star in the world, which is who?
Elon Musk.
No, pop star.
Oh, pop star. I thought you said upstart.
No.
The richest pop star in the world. I don't know. You know, so you better.
Okay. Taylor Swift. There you go.
Taylor Swift, sorry. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm a musician, but Taylor is a good musician. She's a great songwriter. But to me, her superpower is her ability to create a community, right? They call them Swifties for a reason. So you've got metalhead Swifties, cheeseheads, right? You pick your group, your community of people, and the folks that do this right consciously, strategically build that community like you guys have done. And David, you mentioned earlier this virtuous cycle, right? And I actually call them virtuous functional cycles, where a community specifically, if nurtured correctly, just feeds on itself and it becomes this self-fulfilling sales engine that you don't have to spend any money on, right? And I go into a lot of detail about you can't control community, because when you control it, try to control it, it will bite you back, right?
Yeah.
If you nurture it in a really thoughtful, strategic, and caring way, it becomes this massive, massive sales engine that will drive down your cost of acquisition for customers, takes customer sat up, right? You don't have to say, can I ask you to be a reference? Like, they're out promoting your company anyway, right? Community is a really, really big strategic tool that, you know, your teams can use, and you guys have already done that on the franchise side. That is incredibly powerful and incredibly underutilized in business today.
I absolutely love this thread. There's a lot of times this is what happens. You get on a call or on a podcast or a discussion with a friend or a business associate, and you find something really, really juicy and big, kind of like in the at the end of an hour as you kind of get into it. But I absolutely love this topic because I think so I'm going to double click on it myself. We'll all have a turn at it. I think, you know, when I think about what a really, really healthy metric of a company is, when pick your term, the referral rate, the word of mouth rate, the kind of just the self-directed ambassadorship for it, you know, like the Taylor Swift stuff, the Swifties, of which both of my daughters are huge Swifties. I can't tell you how far they've flown and how much money they've spent to go to another Taylor Swift concert. I'm like, okay, wow, I never liked the band that much. But it's such a healthy metric because it's basically, to my mind, it's rooted in, and in Scott's business, BoxDrop, it's rooted in his customers have been empowered to succeed, and their lives have been changed, and they have succeeded. They become boot scalers, so they want to share it, right? They want to share it with their friend, with somebody they met, with their uncle, with their child, and on it goes. And so what I think a company creates value and transforms lives with their product, service, business model, whatever, then it creates, it creates people who want to go out and share that, and we've mentioned Apple. They do a fantastic job. I mean, they absolutely obsess on making sure the customer has a great experience in their ecosystem, and so therefore they want to share it. So really powerful stuff. So I just got two final questions for you guys. I'm going to bundle them up on them. I'm going to start with you, Pete, and end with Scott. So the two final questions for you are: if you just had one piece of advice that you would give somebody to help them scale up faster, what would it be? And then the second part of that question is, what mind shift would you tell them, or what mindset, if you'd like, would you like them to carry forward to maybe enter into the world of the boot scalers?
Yeah, let me start with the second question first. So I have a chapter in the book called Lean Into Your Chip. And what I meant by that, and I discovered this wasn't originally in my first set of questions, but as I started getting the personal stories of a lot of the founders, CEOs, I heard a lot of, I'm doing this to, show my parents that I could do it, to show my ex I could do it, to show my former employee that I could do it, over and over. And a lot of these folks had this chip. And I think in today's society, there's this notion of go to therapy, get rid of the chip. They didn't. They leaned into the chip, and that's what drove them to have incredible success. And then directly tied to that is, from a mindset perspective, is I think there's this, we all kind of get in our own way. We get in our own head of, I can't do this. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to trust. I'm not worthy enough. Like all the things, the stories we tell ourselves, right? And what was extraordinary, I was talking to one CEO. They're doing over 200 million in revenue. They've got 20 or 25% net profit margins. And he's like, I get imposter syndrome every day. And I just went, I'm like, are you kidding? Like you're in the book for a reason, man. You are the 1%. And from the rest of the business metrics, you're blowing everybody out of the water. How in God's name, could you say you have this imposter syndrome? And he's like, I just sometimes think I'm going to screw it up, right? And
Yeah.
point being, right, we even the successful people, they're all telling themselves the same stories, and they're just able to kind of break through that and kind of get past it in whatever way they do that, whether it's, therapy, whether it's a good advisory board, whatever it is, right? They all kind of have different ways to kind of get through that. But so I think, to the folks listening to this, you can do this. You can scale your business without outside capital. You don't have to sell your equity, and your limit to scaling is basically what's in your head. That's it, period.
I love it. I love it. That's great advice. So, Scott, I'll bring it to you to close us out. So, what one piece of advice would you give someone to help them scale up faster and keeping their sanity and their equity? And then, what's a mindset you'd like them to have?
I really like what Pete did, kind of reversing the answers to those two. It just feels right, and it sounded right as he was saying it. So the answer to the second one's where I want to start because it's really easy. Um, you read Pete's book, and I would want the takeaway to be if we, meaning the stories of the people in the book and the lessons they're in, if we did it, you can do it too. And Pete said that at the beginning. Almost everybody, if not everybody in the book, were ordinary people. There were no superpowers. It wasn't people that inherited their starting point. It's ordinary people. It wasn't extraordinary necessarily people. Outside of maybe, I would bet all of them had a pretty incredible work ethic.
Yeah.
And probably pretty desirable of learning things. That and work ethics, I think, are common denominators to rugged entrepreneurs. But one piece of advice, I got to give that two parts. So one, just because I think it fulfills a big need and a special purpose, piece of advice would be read Pete's book. I think that's going to be an incredible game changer for a lot of entrepreneurs. So first of all, read the book. And then after you read the book and digest so much wisdom that you're going to get from it, truly look at what you see doing in your head in business and identify in that space of industry or product, whatever the business is all about. Look at it from the perspective of what is the biggest, and I mean the biggest, need in the marketplace that surrounds your business potential, the biggest you can possibly think of, and then intentionally design ways for your business to fill that need. Because when there's enough people out there that want what you've put together, bootstrapping and boot scaling. I got to keep the BoxDrop boot scaling is going to become a part of my
I love it.
But boot scaling is never going to be easier, but it sure is going to become a lot easier than it would be if you do those two things.
Yep, that's fantastic. Fantastic advice from quite frankly two gentlemen who both have written books for entrepreneurs, both who have scaled companies, sold companies. So super excited about this episode and this discussion. And Pete and Scott, thank you both for your time. I know I've taken a bunch of notes, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So to everyone tuning in, how do you find this book? And if I can get it in there. There we go. It's kind of pixelating, but scale up faster. Go to and correct me if I'm wrong, Pete. You can find it on Amazon, but if you want to get the extra goodies and get some things that you're not going to get on Amazon, head over to scaleupfaster.com.
You got it.
And if you're serious about growing a business that you own and control, this book's a blueprint for you. As for BoxDrop, if you want to get in there and be a BoxDrop boot scaler, then head over to boxdropfranchise.com, and you'll learn a lot more about owning your own location and building a business that truly gives you freedom and success. So with that, gentlemen, I'm going to close it and say thanks for watching. And remember, faster growth is possible. You just need the right tools, the right mindset, and the courage to start.
Yeah, and I want to sign off by saying this book is only possible because of guys like you, that you offered up your time. You're busy people. You offered up selfishly, your time to help other people, and without, and very open and transparent, and pretty much any question I asked you answered, and all the financial stuff you gave me. So I just want to thank you guys for contributing to, hopefully what, will continue to change a lot more lives than you already have. So thank you.
Our pleasure. Scott, you want to give us the last word?
He always gets the last
I
word.
look forward to being a part of all this, man. I can hear the stories coming about lives that'll be changed in a great entrepreneurial way. So I want to thank Pete for having the vision to even think about the idea of writing a book.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
See you
All right.
guys.
Thanks.